Hey everyone, Tom Eston here. Welcome to a special best of edition of the Shared Security Podcast. Today we're taking you back to 2009 with the second episode ever released, which also marked the debut of everyone's favorite co-host, Kevin Johnson. Kevin joins Scott Wright and me to talk about the month of Facebook bugs, cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, and a major Canadian privacy ruling involving Facebook. It's a great snapshot of where social media security was back then, how far we've come, and in many cases, how some things are exactly the same as they were in 2009. Enjoy this look back at a classic episode, and I'll see you next week for an all-new episode.
You're listening to the Social Media Security Podcast, helping expose the risks of social media. Your hosts today are Tom Eston, Scott Wright, and Kevin Johnson. Here's episode 2 for September 2009.
Thanks for joining us for the second episode of the definitive Social Media Security Podcast. Why don't we start by getting a little bit of feedback from last show?
Yeah, I got some good feedback. There was 2 people actually that sent me an email just saying how they liked the content and the formats.
Okay.
And they were hoping, they were looking for what the next episode was. So
Good.
We had about, last I checked the stats, I think we had over like 130 some downloads. So
that's good.
Yeah.
So I think maybe what we'll do right now is just go through our quick agenda for this podcast and carry on from there.
Yeah, the one thing we could do, because I know we introduced ourselves last episode, but we should probably have Kevin do a short intro.
Good point.
His background.
Okay, yeah. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Kevin Johnson. I work for InGuardians as a senior security analyst, and I'm also an author and instructor at the SANS Institute, where I teach web penetration testing courses. I'm an open source addict running a number of projects, including Base, the web front end for Snort, and Samurai WTF, which is a live CD focused on web pen testing.
Very cool.
Pretty much an all-around nerd.
Yeah, that was hard to tell from that description.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin is the man when it comes to web application security. So he's a great addition to the hosts that we have because he can provide a good insight into how web applications, which obviously social networks are, and how they work and some of the vulnerabilities that we find in them. And then how they affect you as the user of these social networks.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. So don't mind me, Kevin, if I interrupt you once in a while and ask, what the heck do you mean by that? Because kind of my side of the audience is typically not all that technical necessarily. I'm trying to educate managers on things they need to know for business. So that's what I'll be looking for when we get down to the technical stuff.
No, it makes sense.
Good. So I'll just run through our quick agenda for today, and then we can just move along. So today in the Social Media Security Podcast, Tom's going to talk about the Facebook bugs, the month of Facebook bugs. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Good stuff. We've got a few things to talk about there. Kevin's going to spend a few minutes talking about cross-site scripting, also abbreviated as XSS. And that'll be, I think, very interesting and informative for many of us. It sounds kind of weird and techy, but in fact, you see it a lot, and it's something that I think will be really helpful for everybody listening to this call to know about. And finally, I'm going to spend some time. I'm Scott Wright. I'll be talking about the Canadian Facebook privacy ruling that happened. There was a ruling and some responses from Facebook that were really interesting in the last month, so I'll be talking about that. So, and that's because I'm coming from Canada, up in Ottawa. And Kevin's in Florida, and Tom is?
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, so we're spanning the continent. Finally, I think we'll have Q&A. If there's some feedback from any of our listeners, we'll add that in at the end. So why don't we start off with you, Tom, and cover the month of Facebook bugs.
Great. There's a researcher called the Harmony Guy who we've worked with a lot lately. I know Kevin and I both know him. He decided that this month, the month of September, would be a good month to raise some awareness on the Facebook platform, specifically those third-party applications that you see installed or that you may have installed onto your Facebook profile. So what do we mean by third-party application? We're talking about those applications like bumper sticker, causes, all those annoying things like throwing snowballs at your friends. The list goes on. Some of them are actually, productive applications that help you network with your friends, and of course, you've seen other ones that are completely useless and provide no value at all. Unfortunately, we see a lot of the provide no value at all applications being installed by thousands and thousands of people. So we wanted to put some focus on just some of the not only privacy problems, but the application security problems of these apps. So if you don't know, Facebook has a program, it's called Facebook Verified Apps. And what those are, I wouldn't consider them verified. It's kind of like a false sense of security, where Facebook just kind of takes a quick look at the application that a developer has put together to see if they follow basic guidelines. Does it have buttons that the user can click? Is it user friendly? Does it meet these sets of standards? The thing that they don't do is they don't provide any kind of code review. They don't provide any kind of checks to ensure that the application is in fact safe to use. So what the Harmony Guy did was he focused on a lot of these apps that are considered verified. And he did that by, there's a website you can go to that tracks the most popular Facebook applications, and he kind of started at that top 30 list, and most of those apps are verified by Facebook. Well, at the halfway point of, it was around September 15th, he was able to find 19 vulnerable applications to things like cross-site scripting and other vulnerabilities like cross-site request forgery. And in a minute here, Kevin will talk about what cross-site scripting is to kind of show you, how serious these types of issues are. He was able to, 12 of those were verified applications, and 13 of those were able to be clickjacking capable, which that's another technique to get you to basically get the user to click on something they're not supposed to. So as of today, he's successfully exploited 9 more Facebook apps that were found vulnerable to the same types of vulnerabilities before, but one of them I actually found in an application called Network Blogs, and I found a persistent cross-site scripting vulnerability, which Kevin will explain what that is. And I also found some SQL injection in that application. And that was the first time that both the Harmony Guy and myself have found an app that was susceptible to that kind of vulnerability. And then since then, we found more applications vulnerable to that persistent cross-site scripting and the SQL injection. So again, it was really this month we're trying to focus on those third-party applications, showing that obviously when they say they're verified, it's not truly verified. It's more of a false sense of security, in our opinion. Many of these applications are poorly coded. They're created by people that probably shouldn't be developers, unfortunately, and even the ones that are developers, they write this code in a way that it's not secure. And then lastly, we want to just shed some attention on this, not only to the users of these applications, but we're hoping that Facebook notices all of these problems in the apps. I'm sure they have, but we think that they need to change some of their practices when it comes to not only how they deploy APIs and things like that to the platform, but how they communicate this and privacy settings around applications to the user base in Facebook. So that's kind of the project in a nutshell.
Okay. I'm just curious when you talk about testing or trying to discover these vulnerabilities or weaknesses in the apps, are you doing things like actually creating a new web page and trying to do a clickjacking attack on the app itself, or how do you actually test and find that?
Yeah, in certain instances, most of the time, all it takes is injecting by literally putting some code into your web browser window or into the input boxes and things like that, and just submitting it and seeing what happens.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all it takes. The other important thing to note, excuse me, is that we contacted all of the developers of these applications once we found a vulnerability and disclosed the vulnerability to the developer and allowed them time to fix the issue. So we didn't post anything to the web, showing that, hey, here's a vulnerable application, because we obviously don't want the bad guys.
You don't want to gain the 0-day fame?
No, we're I would consider us white hat hackers. So
Good. Sounds good.
We want to make sure that the apps are fixed first before we talk about the vulnerabilities.
That's great. And I just had one other question, because you mentioned that there was a web page that has been set up where it's tracking all of these things that have been found. Is that right? Or what was that website?
Yes. Well, you can find all of them on socialmediasecurity.com. We've got every time that the Harmony guy or myself, we release a new vulnerability, we post it on there. Also the Harmony guy's site. And then there's the in the show notes, I'll have a link to those top 30 Facebook applications, and they show how many users actually have those installed. And in some cases, we're talking millions of users have some vulnerable apps installed. Yep.
How do you know how many have it installed? Does it tell you in the app itself, or?
Yes. If you go to the application on the Facebook page, before you click the button to install this app, it'll actually tell you how many other users are using it.
Sounds good. I don't think I ever want to be user 1 of any app.
You don't?
I'd rather be user 1 than user 10 million, because then it's a more likely targeted app.
Absolutely. Yeah, the number one app actually is causes. So I don't know if you've seen all those cause requests. People can create these,
for charity causes and things.
All that stuff.
Right.
That's actually the number one installed app. And that was one of the first apps that the Harmony guy was able to hack.
Now, it's not a malicious app itself. It's just you're saying people could exploit it for their own purposes.
Yes, by using or by finding common web application vulnerabilities, and Kevin can go in a little more on how those work. By finding those vulnerabilities, basically you can find anybody that has those apps installed and then target those users
Right.
to exploit them, do whatever you like with them.
Interesting. So will that project be going on indefinitely, or it was a month of bugs, but as you said, vulnerabilities get posted on the social media security website. Is that basically where people should go then to keep following it?
Yeah, like I said, since this was only a 1 month awareness campaign, we're probably going to end this at the end of September. If we find any more that are kind of high profile after that, we'll probably publish them. But we kind of wanted to. This was kind of in the tradition. In July, another security researcher conducted the month of Twitter bugs, where he did a similar type of hacking for the entire month, showing vulnerabilities in third-party Twitter apps. So this is very similar.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. So anything else to add then, either Tom or Kevin, on the month of Facebook bugs?
I don't have anything else. I'm just hoping that it raises awareness about the issues with third-party applications. Right, Kevin?
Yes.
And if anybody has questions or comments, obviously they can go to the social media security website and put comments in there with respect to any particular apps or vulnerabilities. If you have questions, that's the place to go. All right, so part 2, talking about cross-site scripting. So Kevin, would you like to inform us?
Sure. Cross-site scripting is actually my favorite exploit. So I was pretty excited when you guys said, hey, why don't we discuss this? Cross-site scripting is one of those really misunderstood attacks, especially by users who aren't necessarily as technical, or even if they are technical, not as security minded as, paranoid nerds like myself. So, cross-site scripting, in its simplest form, and I'm gonna try to give the simplest example, and I know that we can do lots more complex things with cross-site scripting, but it's basically where an attacker is able to insert content into an application that is then displayed to another user, and that user's browser trusts that content came from the site the user is accessing. What I mean by that is, you go out to, let's say, a Facebook application, since we seem to be focused on those today, as we should be. And I, as the attacker, am able to inject content there. Your browser is going to trust that content came from that Facebook application. Now, the content I'm injecting, of course, is special content, right? It's dynamic. It's some type of content, typically JavaScript, that your browser then acts on, doing what that JavaScript instructs the browser to do, right? Simple programming language. Typically, you see the examples, the majority of the times that we find cross-site scripting flaws, what we do is we cause your browser to pop up a little dialog box that just says, hey, Kevin was here, or, this site is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. And you can click OK and it goes away. Personally, as a security person, I think that we are doing a disservice with doing that, because people look at that pop-up and say, oh, well, it's just a pop-up. What do I care? When in actuality, we can run any client-side code that your browser will support. For example, Tom and I at DEF CON did a demonstration where we were able to inject content that would then take control of the user's browser, have it go to websites that you want to, port scan that user's internal network, pretty much whatever an attacker would be interested in doing. It's one step away from taking complete control of the user's computer. So pretty serious at that point.
Very scary, yeah.
Yeah. So that's cross-site scripting in a nutshell. Now, as Tom mentioned earlier, there are different types of cross-site scripting, two of them to be exact. One is called reflective or reflection attacks, and the other one is a persistent attack. And let's start with reflective. And all that this means is that the attacker sends a link to a user. We typically demo that by sending an email, but in a site like Facebook or MySpace and social networks, it's actually easier just to post a link that you ask people to click on, right? How many times do you see on your wall where somebody says, hey, come check out this really cool whatever, right? And so you're delivering that link to the user. When the user clicks that link, it goes to the vulnerable application, passing the attack code as part of that link. The application then reads the parameters from that link and echoes those back to the user. So that's why we say it's reflective, right? You click the link, send it up to the site, and the site reflects it back to the user. The other style, and in my opinion, the more serious style of cross-site scripting, is a persistent cross-site scripting attack. And this is where the attacker doesn't actually have to send a link to a user at all. They find an application that the application allows them to enter content that is then stored as part of that application's database, data store, whatever. And then as other users browse or use that application, that content is then echoed back. The simplest example that comes to mind is an online forum where I'm able to go and say, hey, everybody, here's my cool message, and as part of that message, I have dynamic client-side content, which that forum stores for me, and then anybody who views my message on that forum is attacked by the cross-site scripting. that's persistent. The reason I say that persistent attacks are more serious than reflective is because they attack a larger audience, typically. Now, of course, with sites like social network sites where we post a link and it is broadcast to every single one of our friends, and in other cases, their friends, based on whether or not they respond to it, reflective attacks are starting to become less targeted and more widespread in regards to who they attack at once, similar to persistent cross-site scripting. So
Cool.
Yeah, and basically the flaw is... Yep.
No, go ahead, Tim.
Okay. Basically, the flaw is that the application developer accepted input from a user and then displayed that input back to other users without filtering or encoding that output. They trusted it.
Yep, and there's a lot of developers, I think, that still just don't quite understand why it's so serious. You can relate to this, right, Kevin?
Oh, yes.
So in terms of Facebook apps, I mean, we're talking about people that have very little coding experience to begin with. So when you're trying to explain this to a Facebook app developer, it's even more difficult.
Well, I mean, if I may be so rude as to bring up, when you and I presented at DEF CON, two of the Facebook API developers, not people who developed applications using the API, but two of the developers of the API had a conversation with us about the demonstration we did where they showed an ignorance of what cross-site scripting is. Right? Developers aren't focused on security. These guys who are supposed to be, I don't know, security smart, if that's a descriptive phrase, they didn't even understand what the big concern was, right? So what? It's just a pop-up.
Yeah. Wow. So do you have any examples of like how this has impacted people in the past? What kind of bad things happen when this happens?
Yeah, we've got examples everywhere from during the primary of the last election, Obama's website was changed to tell people to vote for Hillary, which I don't care what your politics was. That was funny. Minor, right? It doesn't have any real impact on people. I don't think that people believe that Obama was telling them to vote for Hillary, all the way to the Epileptic Foundation, where they have an online support forum, and some evil scum of the earth attacker, and I mean that, posted content that displayed flashing graphics to cause seizures in people who were viewing the website.
Wow.
That's malicious.
Yeah, to put it lightly.
But you also mentioned something when you were talking about the initial potential vulnerabilities that open up as soon as this is allowed to run its course, and one of them you mentioned was doing port scans from inside and reporting back information to its owner, the application's owner, or the writer of the XSS or cross-site scripting. And to me, that says once they've got information about how your system is vulnerable, they can attack it, put a botnet or something else more evil than that even in place. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, 100%. Once I have injected content that your browser is trusting and running, I can do whatever your browser allows me to do. The example of port scanning, well, that's trivial to then inject content that basically requests other ports on your local network on servers to see if they're open, which brings to mind the idea. We trust that our networks are safe because, we have these great firewalls, we have these great intrusion detection systems. Yoo-hoo, this is wonderful. We even go so far as to install antivirus on all of our desktops. And so as an attacker sitting outside your network on the internet, I can't see those internal servers. But if I can hook a browser, and that's what we refer to it as, right? When we send that code down and take control of that browser, we've hooked it. We tell the browser to go find the information for us, and it acts as our proxy. And I don't mean a technical proxy there.
Just as it acts as our into the network.
Yeah. Exactly. It's our eyes and hands, and we're able to touch the things on your network and figure out what's there. And then, of course, we can always redirect your browser over to further malicious code to escalate our privileges on that browser.
So, I mean, is there any limit, or are we just talking about a few commands that are all you really need to escalate things into a bigger attack?
There are limitations to what JavaScript can do, but the smart attacker, and to be honest, the dumber attacker also, simply figures out ways around that. A simple example: JavaScript is not able to determine what your internal IP address is of the machine it's running on, which of course limits your ability. If I want to port scan your internal network, I need to know its IP addressing scheme.
Yes.
Well, so I push down, using JavaScript, I push down a Java applet which does have access to the local network and can tell me what the IP address is. It hands that back up to the JavaScript, and I then use that to port scan the internal network.
Does a person not have to accept the applet?
No.
Or is it can be invisible?
It can be invisible. Yeah, we've made our browsers as feature-rich and as friendly as we possibly can. And I honestly think, as I talk in my web pen testing class when we discuss how we can do all these things, I really think most of the people who develop browsers have been smoking crack for a while.
Really? Yeah.
And so they've just decided to add all of these features. So we no longer have to find a vulnerability in an application to do something on that browser. We can just use the feature set the browser provides to us evilly.
Wow. I remember almost 10 years ago or so when I was working in a software development company doing security software. One of our big things that we relied on was the Java sandbox, or the concept that the browser couldn't really get to your desktop without asking for help or permission, explicit permission. But now it seems everything's able to touch your desktop.
Well, there are things that it's not able to touch, right? Things that pop up and say, hey, this thing wants to access these files. Do you want to let it do that? We won't even discuss the fact that users have been trained that every time the computer asks them something to say yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are features that are powerful and can be used in conjunction. We MacGyver it together to the point where we get what we want.
Yeah. Now, to sort of zero in on the cross-site scripting, when I talk to people about drive-by downloads, and which I think is enabled by JavaScript, because these little windows pop up like Antivirus 2009 says you've got a virus, you need to fix it, click here and buy the upgrade that allows you to fix it. Is that a cross-site scripting attack, or is that just a JavaScript download?
Well, it can be both. Right.
Okay.
If I find a vulnerable website, I can use cross-site scripting to do those drive-by downloads. But in most cases, that's just a place where either the application you're at, the website you're at, is providing that code, or, as we've seen more and more lately, the evil spammers, the evil vendors of that malware, just basically buy ads. And so your website displays the ad from this other site, and that ad contains because
all you put on your thing is go execute this JavaScript at this site, and they can put whatever they want there.
Yep. So I wouldn't consider that a cross-site scripting vulnerability, because, well, you designed your app to display that code. You assumed, and we all know what happens when you assume, it makes, right, that ad code is not going to be malicious, that you can trust it.
Right. Now, we talked about the fact that the browser, is getting less and less secure. So now you see additional plugins and things like that. Like I use NoScript, which I think a lot of security professionals recommend. What are your thoughts on using NoScript as a way of blocking this kind of thing?
Well, right off the bat, I would never run NoScript. And that's a personal opinion. It's based on a trust issue. I have a serious concern with running code from somebody who has already proven that they're ethically flexible. The AdBlock Plus scenario would be what caused that. But in actuality, I found NoScript to not be very useful, mainly because the web currently requires in most cases, in most functionality cases, for you to enable JavaScript for that site or this site or the site over there. And so, well, I know for a fact that if you're using Facebook, you're probably enabling JavaScript, even though you run no script. And so if I can inject JavaScript code into Facebook, no script's not doing anything to stop it anyways.
Yeah, if you're letting the top-level domain execute script, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So when we install NoScript, we immediately tell it, well, Google's okay, and Facebook's okay, and MySpace is okay, even though, as I believe Tom said, it's the GeoCities, of the internet now.
Yes.
So what do you recommend then?
Panic.
From a user point of view, just run out in the street and yell the sky's falling?
Yeah. Shut off the internet. Let's not do it anymore. Really, from a user perspective, I really don't think there's much you can do if you're allowing these apps, if you're running JavaScript, if you're doing all of this. What we need to do is start focusing on developer education and developer remediation. If the developers can't fix their applications.
So one idea that I have when I think in terms of helping businesses deal with letting their staff use the internet, I often advocate trying to separate your browsing activities from anything on your operational network that you rely on.
Yes.
Now, that obviously would solve the problem, because whatever is running on an isolated machine wouldn't be able to get to your operational systems. What about virtualization solutions where you may run VMware or something like that on top of your normal operational system? Can that isolate your browser enough to protect itself from this kind of thing?
Well, it would isolate your browser from the host OS, but if that browser still has network access, which it would have to get to the internet, I can still port scan the host OS.
You can still see other machines on the network, right?
Exactly. So, really what you start looking to do at that point is deploying intrusion detection systems throughout your network and monitoring them. So, because you would see the port scan coming out of that browser. Why is Joe in accounting port scanning our server farm? Is a question you really don't want to ask. Joe just started to become a computer nerd? I don't know. Yeah, well, that might be it also. Yeah, Nmap released something new this weekend, and everybody's trying it out.
It's the accounting version.
Right. The other piece of this... The other piece is, there's still, I think, a big piece with user education is we can really focus on the user, and literally we need to start getting people to stop clicking on everything and think before they click on stuff. Because a lot of these, a lot of the phishing scams and a lot of the things that are out there, especially on social networks, there's a lot of clues when these get sent to you, even links and stuff sent from your friends. But people click on them anyway. So that's half the battle. If we can teach
exactly.
users.
And so what I think this means we need, Tom and Kevin, I think it means we need to run a contest for someone to develop a slogan that we can put on socialmediasecurity.com T-shirts, and then we'll give away a copy of the T-shirt to the winner, and we can hand them out at shows and things like that.
That makes sense.
Oh, that'll work.
We just need a flashy little slogan to try and get people to stop clicking on things. Okay, well, moving right along, why don't we talk for a few minutes about the Canadian Privacy Commissioner's Office versus Facebook. When it comes to privacy on social networking, looks like the Canadian Privacy Commissioner is pretty active and serious about taking companies to task that are operating in Canada. I can tell you a little bit about what happened there. The Privacy Commissioner's Office received a complaint from an organization within the University of Ottawa called the Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic, CIPIC. And it was under the PIPEDA legislation. They were complaining that Facebook violated a number of aspects of the Act as far as citizens of Canada go and treating Canadian citizens' private information. And so they put this complaint in with the Privacy Commissioner, and they investigated it. This was about a year ago. Now, the Privacy Commissioner, their office investigated it and discovered back in the summertime that they had a number of concerns, and so they published that. And typically what happens is the organization has about 30 days to respond. And during that time, Facebook actually did negotiate with the Privacy Commissioner's Office, and on September 1st, I think it was, they issued a resolution that stated that Facebook was actually going to comply with, I think, the significant recommendations of the Privacy Commissioner. So that was pretty big news. So what I'll do is I'll cover just a few of the major points in very brief terms, and you can also read more about it at the Privacy Commissioner's website. But I also had an interview with a spokesperson from the Privacy Commissioner's Office this week, just digging a little deeper to try to find out more about how this process worked and how it went in this case. So I'm going to put that in right after I fill you in with these details. So the primary areas that there were complaints about was, as Tom and I and Kevin like to point out, the API for developing apps within Facebook is rather weak as far as security goes. And so that was, I think, probably the most significant and the biggest point that they conceded on. Facebook is actually going to make changes to their API for developers, at least in the aspect of how people are informed about the abilities of an application to access private information. The thing is, it's going to take about a year, I think, for them to implement. So I think they're getting some leeway or some grace period to actually implement this. But they have agreed to do it. So I think that's quite interesting. So just wondering, Tom, did you have any comments on it from your point of view? Do you think this is going to help?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction. The problem, as Kevin knows, the same issue. Once you install a Facebook application, it has access to everything in your profile. And in fact, what a lot of people don't know, and something I describe in my privacy settings, is you don't even have to have any applications installed. If your friends have applications installed, if you don't set the correct settings in your profile, your friends' apps can see all your profile information. So when we're talking about apps and Facebook, I mean, it's a serious, serious problem when it comes to privacy. So I think they are going in the right direction by doing this, with changing, hopefully, some of the API and at least notifying users this is exactly what this application is going to access.
Right.
I think that's a good thing.
Okay, good. But you'd actually prefer to see a lot more progress from a security point of view as well to prevent bad things from happening once you do click on OK, right?
Yeah, I don't think Facebook apps should have access to everything that's in your profile. I think it should be you should be accepting what you think is reasonable, because everybody's different when it comes to what types of privacy settings you want to put.
Now, given the fact that they're saying it's going to take a year to implement this, it seems like a long time just to implement a couple of tweaks on how we're informing people about what's happening. Do you think they're actually going to make some changes in the security as they're doing this?
Well, I think this kind of coincides with Facebook's revamped privacy model that they're about to roll out, that they announced earlier in the summer. So they're going to have all new, ways to set these, your privacy settings in Facebook. They're actually revamping the entire thing, because what they're about to do is, like, all your status updates now, you can make that available to everyone now, or like your friends or friends of friends, things like that.
Right. There's a little button that says who to share it with.
Yes, but what they're really trying to do is they're going to try to open that up to the entire internet, because right now there's not a good way to search for information in Facebook outside of Facebook unless you're logged into Facebook. Well, they want to change that because they want to be more like Twitter, where all of these status updates are out there for everyone. So the first step in that process is by changing their privacy settings so it's more friendly to sharing more information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because, on one hand, the Privacy Commissioner is asking them to be more clear about what's happening and upfront with people. But as we've talked about before, the whole reason that Facebook and social networking tools do so well is because they don't talk about the risks. And it's I was listening to Bruce Schneier recently in his podcast. He's talking about privacy salient, which means if if you talk about privacy, people will be concerned about it. If you don't talk about it, they care less. And so, it makes some sense, right? And then that's why these social networking sites prefer to hide the fine print a little bit. But meanwhile, the privacy commissioner is saying, you've got to make it transparent, put it up front. So it'll be interesting to see what the end result looks like.
Definitely.
The next point, there were three others that were worth talking about, I think, in this podcast. One of them is deactivation versus deletion of accounts. So it had been rather unclear when you actually wanted to cancel your Facebook account what to do, and they would tell you could deactivate, but they didn't say much about actual deletion of everything and all data. It is possible, supposedly, but now what they're going to have to do after this ruling and the resolution is that they have to make it clearer at the point where you're trying to cancel your account or deactivate your account that you do have the option to delete all data as well.
That's interesting because I know some test accounts I've tried deleting them, and it is very difficult to delete. It kind of keeps it in a standby mode in case you ever want to come back to Facebook.
Yeah. And that's what they call deactivation. And I think what the privacy commissioner also wanted to see was a retention period stated that says if you've deactivated for a certain period of time, after that it will get deleted if you haven't reactivated it.
The big question that I've had with this is one of I understand the request for privacy and the request for the ability to delete things when you delete your account, but how does that take into account things like you post something to your wall, I comment on it, you then respond to me, I respond to you, we start this whole conversation, now you delete your account. Well, does it delete my comments on your wall posting, or in which case you're deleting my content?
Yeah, it's also interconnected. What can you do?
Yeah. And then if you don't delete my comments, now I have comments on my system that have no context. So while, I agree with privacy and I'd like more privacy, even though I've given up believing it we will ever have any, I'm curious as to how they're gonna deal with that part of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any knowledge, Tom, of what they actually do when you try and delete stuff now, or is there any? Have you ever been successful?
Yeah, this kind of comes up with photos as well. So photos tagged of you. That's an interesting one because if you've ever been tagged in a photo, that shows up.
Even if you're not a member.
Yeah, in some cases that's true. So I actually haven't done any research on what actually gets removed once your account is disabled.
Maybe we should make that the topic of a future show. And
it should be. I wonder. I actually think since it's disabled, I think all that stuff is still out there.
Yeah, I mean, on the internet, everything lives forever, right? So it's hard to say you're going to delete it. I guess they can take it off their site, but it may have been cached at some time somewhere.
Right. Yeah, there's a whole issue of so Facebook has all this data even when it's deactivated or deleted, and like you said, Scott, there's got to be retention periods and things like that. But the unfortunate part, and I was thinking about this because there was another article I don't think we're gonna have time to talk about today, but about how your information is shared with third parties and how it's used, and how like Facebook takes all your information, and it's basically demographic type information, but what they'll do is they'll put it into a package and then give you a unique identifier that goes out to these third parties. So kind of adds an interesting dynamic to the whole thing of, you share all this information, and what specifically goes out to these third parties. It's quite interesting.
I think we really should make that a topic of a future podcast. We could probably spend half an hour or more, and it would give us a chance to gather some more accurate information instead of speculating. But just the last 2 points on the Facebook and Privacy Commissioner issues. There was the issue of personal information of non-users who were invited to join the site, whether or not they should be retaining information of that type. And it turns out that apparently they have not been retaining that. And I think of particular concern was for tracking of the success of invitations. So I guess to check their marketing campaigns and see what kind of response they got from certain types of invitations being sent. So apparently they don't retain that stuff, and they're promising they never will, apparently. And the last point was the accounts of deceased users. Obviously, as when we have a tragic death or something like that, someone's friends would like to kind of memorialize them and reference their web page or their Facebook page, and they wanted a changing in the wording of the privacy policy around accounts of people who have passed away. So that's important, but probably not as critical from our point of view for security and privacy as the others. I recently had the opportunity to speak with Anne-Marie Hayden, a spokesperson for the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, about the Commissioner's finding and resulting announcements by Facebook regarding the changes to their privacy policies. I had sent Anne-Marie a few questions by email to find out more about how that process worked, and she agreed to speak with me by phone. So my first question for her was, why was the Canadian Privacy Commissioner able to influence such a large entity as Facebook to take her recommendations, given that Canada's 12 million Facebook users represent less than 10% of the 200 million Facebook users worldwide? And here's Anne-Marie's response.
First of all, if you know the way that we work, we tend to resolve issues through we tend to try and resolve issues with organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Our recommendations were very reasonable, in our view, doable.
Right.
And so I think that's why they determined in the end to implement all of our recommendations. And if you listened into their press conference and saw some of the stuff they were saying publicly, there was a recognition from their end that good privacy is good business.
Right.
So, I suspect that may be another reason why they thought it would make sense to comply.
Then we took a moment to discuss what the process actually was for getting this change to happen.
We're an organization that has the ability to investigate under two federal privacy laws, one for the federal public sector and one for the private sector. This one fell into the private sector, obviously.
Right.
And so CIPIC had some concerns about the site and made a complaint to our office,
mm-hmm.
and therefore we investigated CIPIC's complaint. So if you take a look on CIPIC's site, their complaint was quite planned out.
Right.
And they had a number of different areas that they wanted us to look at. But even before we received complaints from individuals, our first step, the first step that we recommend to folks is, first of all, to take the matter to the organization, to try and resolve the matter directly with the organization. Yeah. So companies are responsible under PIPEDA for making sure that there's somebody within that company, typically that's someone called the Chief Privacy Officer, who can handle complaints and hopefully find some type of resolution to the issue, or to help provide clarity or answer questions or whatever when it comes to privacy. If an individual can't resolve the matter that way, then they can make a complaint to our office.
Okay, so there was no magic. It was just somebody requested it in the right way.
A lot of hard work.
Yeah, exactly.
a lot of hard work, because, as you know, it's a very multifaceted investigation. We looked at a lot of different areas, but
right.
But ultimately we had to look at it with respect to the Act and what the Act requires.
Next, I was interested in finding out what would have happened if Facebook had not complied with the Privacy Commissioner's findings.
Your second question, what would the outcome likely have been, and what actions could we have taken if they didn't make the changes?
Yes.
So if under PIPEDA, what we can do and what we typically do, so we have a report of findings, right? That's our investigation report.
Mm-hmm.
That goes to the company, and in it, if we find that they are not in compliance with the Act, we say, okay, well, here are our recommendations. We recommend that you comply.
Yes.
And then we give the organization typically 30 days to indicate to us how they plan to comply with the Act. And if they indicate to us that they don't plan to comply, we can take the matter to the federal court. We don't have order-making powers, but it's incredibly rare that an organization would not implement our recommendations.
Even a foreign organization like Facebook?
Pardon me?
Even a foreign organization who doesn't really...
They're operating in Canada.
I guess, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and we obviously have the power to investigate them. So there was a recognition, obviously, that they needed to comply with Canadian law. There are up to 12 million Canadian users of Facebook.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is something that we could have taken to the federal court. But like I said, we didn't have to, and we don't normally have to do that.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare that an organization does not take the steps to comply with our recommendations.
Okay, that's good.
Because it makes good business sense.
Sure, yeah. I think people are just surprised, that you can actually have that kind of influence, and it's good that you can, and it's just it's good for people to understand too that this is a process that seems to work now, and I think it did surprise people. Finally, I had asked if the Commissioner was planning any further recommendations for Facebook or other social networking sites. We also discussed what the future might hold for any social networking sites that might gain the attention of the Commissioner in the future.
We investigated under the Act. We made recommendations, and they've indicated to us that they're addressing all of our recommendations to our satisfaction.
Right.
So that's where we are now with Facebook. Hopefully other sites, you asked about other social
yes.
social networking sites. Hopefully others will see this as a blueprint.
Yes.
So hopefully they'll take a look at the report and gain a sense of what some best practices can be.
Mm-hmm. And, do you know if you've received any complaints about other sites?
I'm not sure. I know that we have done at least one other investigation into a social networking site. It's actually posted on our website.
Okay.
But I can't say whether or not it's Facebook or another site. We don't typically identify the names of organizations that we investigate. But my understanding is that we have also been contacted by another popular social networking site to see how they can comply.
That's great.
So that's all good news. Yeah,
exactly.
And on the other end of that, there's the responsibility of organizations, but there's also the responsibility of individuals, and we have a mandate not only to educate organizations insofar as their responsibilities, but to explain to individuals what their rights are.
Yes.
And we'll really continue to encourage individuals to protect their personal information online. Because at the end of the day, if you're not posting highly sensitive personal information online, then it's obviously less at risk.
Exactly. Actually, that's almost answering the question I was going to ask you in addition to those three I sent you before, and that was just that with privacy policies you can only go so far, and you do have to get people to read them and understand them. And from a security professional's point of view, where I'm coming from, is there anything that you can recommend that I can do or that anybody in our industry can do to help people understand and make responsible use of these tools? Well,
if you read our investigation report to Facebook and the statements made by the Commissioner and the Assistant Commissioner, there's a lot of language focused around transparency and ease of use. And if you make it more difficult for people to understand, and if you don't make it as clear, then you limit their ability to protect their personal information on the site.
Okay.
So there were a number of areas where they did need to fix things, but a lot of it did have to do also with just being a lot more transparent.
Okay, so if we're advising clients or vendors who are putting together solutions that are intended to handle private information, we should be telling them, make sure that your policies are not only legally binding but easy to understand and transparent, as you say.
Well, and take a look at some of the other things that we said in the finding, because it what we're recommending to them, like I said, hopefully it's a blueprint for other organizations to take a look and see what they can do to further improve their practices.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll do that. And also, just so I can let people know, your web address is privcom.gc.ca, is that right?
It's priv, so it's www.priv.gc.ca.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time, Anne-Marie, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk again.
Okay, take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, Tom, as creator of the socialmediasecurity.com website, do you have any final comments today?
Just to keep the podcast at a reasonable time, I'm not going to go into too much detail. The two things I wanted to cover, especially with the third-party information and how that's shared, I think that could be a topic for another podcast. But just real quick to let everyone know that I did update my Facebook security and privacy guide. That's downloadable from socialmediasecurity.com. Because there were some recent changes with Facebook's privacy, not only the settings, but a couple of them they've actually removed. One of them in particular was you had the ability at one time to not post the time and date of your wall posts and status updates.
Right.
They have since removed that, and you don't have a choice anymore.
Wow, okay.
Times are posted no matter what.
That's good to know. Now another question.
Like
based on the fact that you and I recorded we did a podcast and an audio book or a guide that sort of followed around your version 1 of your Facebook privacy and security guide. Is that still relevant or useful in any way, or should I take it down off the site?
It's still relevant. I just think that we maybe need to put a link to the new guide.
The new version, yeah.
Just because there's a couple of things that, especially with applications, I wanted to clarify. I put in a little more explanation on how third-party applications interact with your account and your friends' accounts, because that was a kind of open question I had.
Yeah, it's a very important topic, too, to make sure people understand. Yeah. Well, that wraps up the September episode of the Social Media Security Podcast. I apologize for the minor audio problems we had towards the end there. No doubt it was a problem somewhere along the Canadian-U.S. border. Wanted to thank Kevin Johnson for joining Tom Eston and myself, Scott Wright, this month for the second episode of Social Media Security Podcast. Join us next month, October 2009, for our next episode. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave a message on our voicemail line at 1-613-693-0997, or you can email us at info@socialmediasecurity.com. So until next time, remember, think before you click.
Thank you for watching or listening this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you like to get your podcasts. Visit sharedsecurity.net for merch, previous episodes, and more. If you'd like to help support the podcast, join our Patreon to get ad-free episodes and many more exclusive supporter-only benefits. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.